So perhaps we could start. Good morning, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to be here as the Secretary General of the OSCE to open this session, an interesting discussion on Central Asia and Afghanistan. When I think that this forum has started as a result of the chairmanship of Slovenia of the OSCE back in 2006, and I think in 2005, and I think the first session of this forum was in 2006, and it kept going and growing ever since. So I think it's, in a way, also good that Slovenian friends also still remember the roots of this initiative and want an OSCE presence in their discussions. Central Asia and Afghanistan is an issue that features highly also on the agenda of the OSCE, and I myself, we had a ministerial decision in Vilnius on stepping up our engagement on Afghanistan at the ministerial in last December, almost a year ago, and we have been heavily involved in the processes. So we'll give just a couple of words to introduce the discussion from an OSCE angle. And then I will give the floor. We have a panel of very prominent and experienced figures who can provide a view from very different perspectives, and that's going to make, I hope, the discussion lively and interesting. Cooperation, I think, is a key word when one looks at Afghanistan, especially post-2014. And this is also at the core of the processes that are ongoing, the Heart of Asia discussion, the series of conferences, Bonn, Istanbul. I think one of the key elements that are emerging is the special responsibilities that the countries of the region, the countries surrounding Afghanistan have. And that's obvious, because if there is instability in Afghanistan, this will affect the neighboring countries. So it is in the interest of everybody to make sure that the future development of Afghanistan is a development that is positive, that is stable, and that it itself contributes to the growth of the region. From an OSCE perspective, we look at this with the strong ownership also within the organization, because the Central Asian countries are full members of our organization. They contribute to the debate on Afghanistan. And there are two modes of operation that I see emerging within the organization. One is really looking at how we can assist those countries in better reaching out to Afghanistan by trying to better coordinate activities of assistance, by trying also to develop a little bit of a strategy on how to deal, a regional strategy on how to deal and what are the priority areas and where to concentrate the efforts. The second side is looking at the security challenges stemming from Afghanistan and potentially affecting the countries of the region, and equipping them or assisting them to equip themselves better in addressing those challenges. And that provides alone a pretty rich menu of issues on which I think it is important to focus, and to focus in a coherent way. As the international community meets, as I said earlier, often in different modes and different venues to address these issues, I think to have a shared strategy and to avoid that there are duplications, that there are different agendas potentially clashing, I think is imperative. So it is important to have this kind of discussions and to get all sides involved as part of this. Looking at the areas of engagement from the perspective of what we do, at least, I would put among the highest priorities the economic issues. I think economic cooperation is important, growth in the region, stimulating trade. We had ourselves positive experiences, even at a small scale. We created some duty-free areas on the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan, working at the level of villages and trying to establish flows of trade while at the same time strengthening the border controls so that you encourage legitimate trade and you discourage every kind of smuggling, fight against corruption. Strengthening in general, democratic institutions, the development of democratic institutions throughout the region is another important issue. Looking at elections, for instance, and elections will also come up in Afghanistan. We ourselves are looking at how we can support these processes is essential. Working on areas such as education, etc. Addressing what we call in the OSCE the TNTs, transnational threats. Fight against terrorism, fighting against trafficking, whether it's drugs or human beings, fighting corruption, working on borders and strengthening border controls, border management across the region, I think is important. And then looking at energy resources, it's a region that is also rich of energy sources and certainly more work in that area. We're looking at infrastructure, building better connections to stimulate trade. So these are some of the issues. The Slovenian organizers have produced a little paper to help focus on the discussion, and they've raised three fundamental questions. Where do strategic potential cooperation lie? What are the advantages of more active engagement for both Europe and the Central Asian countries? What are the obstacles for enhanced cooperation? And how can obstacles be overcome, including the level of democratic development, respect for human rights and the rule of law, and potential be unlocked without treading on the very values Europe is built on? I think these are the questions I would like to draw the attention of panelists to, and then without further ado, I will start a tour de table, let's call it this way, beginning with Ambassador Lambach. Ambassador Lambach is a special envoy in the Office of Prime Minister of India. He has a very distinguished diplomatic career. He was ambassador in the Russian Federation to Germany, was High Commissioner of India to Pakistan, and ambassador to Hungary. Actually, we met at one of the fora dealing with Afghanistan in Dushanbe a few months ago, discussing issues of economic cooperation at the regional level, and he's certainly a very qualified expert. So I think it would be good to have his views from his perspective on this important topic. Ambassador.
Thank you. Dobre Utra. Well, the topic for today's discussion is Afghanistan and Central Asia after 2014. India has a long association with the region. We were amongst the first countries to establish diplomatic missions in all the 5 Central Asian countries. And in fact, in March this year, we observed the 20th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations in all the 5 Central Asian republics. We see them as a potential for cooperation in energy and in the sectors of education and medicine. Similarly, India is establishing Central Asian e-network with hub in India to deliver tele-education and telemedicine connectivity linking all the 5 Central Asian republics, which would be beneficial to Afghanistan also. India is also participating in a long-term plan to integrate land routes linking to the Central Asian Republic to the North-South corridor. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, we have diplomatic relations since 1947. Very few people know that there was a Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation signed in 1950. And more recently, Afghanistan's first strategic partnership agreement was with India. There are, of course, daily flights between our two countries, and our assistance to Afghanistan since 2001 is to the tune of $2 billion. India's assistance to Afghanistan can broadly be described in 4 areas: infrastructure projects, humanitarian assistance. 3, small and community-based development projects. And 4, education and capacity building. For the purpose of our discussion today, 2 projects in infrastructure I would like to mention. This is the 218-kilometer road from Zairang to Delaram in southwestern Afghanistan, and the 202-kilometer electricity transmission line bringing Uzbek electricity from Pule Khumri to Kabul, lighting up the city. The 2 projects, major projects under construction, are the Salma Dam in the Herat region and the Parliament building in Kabul. In addition, more than 100 small and community-based development projects with short gestation period and having a direct impact on the community life with emphasis on local ownership and management in the fields of agriculture, rural development, education, health, vocational training, and solar energy have been initiated. India has assisted Afghanistan national TV network by providing an uplink from Kabul and downlinks in all 24 provinces. As would be evident, these programs are also relevant in the larger context of our Central Asian Connect policy, as we call it also. I will now come to the likely scenario after 2014 in the region. What can it be? 1, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Movement, which has so far not been very active, could play a more important role. 2, more integration of Afghanistan with Central Asia is on the cards. 3, interestingly, and this is just a feeling, we have the Assistant Secretary General on NATO here, but I think there are possibilities of more cooperation between CSTO and NATO in the post-2014 period. And 4, likely more use of the northern distribution network by the United States when they send their supplies to Afghanistan. The organizers have mentioned have given us 3 questions. One is, where do strategic potential of cooperation lie? What are the advantages of more active engagement? The strategic potentials include 1, preventing Afghanistan from becoming a sanctuary and an ally for Al-Qaeda as it was under the Taliban. 2, ensure that there are no safe havens for terrorists outside Afghanistan. 3, reducing illicit drug trade. And 4, ensuring economic cooperation from Central Asia to South Africa. To South Asia. Now, second question is, what are the obstacles for enhanced cooperation? I would list 2. Help to terrorists from outside Afghanistan and safe havens should cease. And 2, the second obstacle is drug and narcotic trade. Now, the third question posed by the BLED Strategic Forum is, how can these obstacles be overcome? I would conclude my remarks by telling you 7 or 8 points on how these could be. 1, involving regional powers, particularly the Central Asian republics, to be more closely involved in international efforts to ensure non-interference and a stable Afghanistan. 2, end outside interference and dismantle infrastructure of terrorism. 3, good governance. 4, redouble counter-narcotic efforts. 5, regional support for Afghanistan's efforts for reconciliation. It is very important that all regional countries support it. 6, speedy augmentation of training and equipping of the Afghan National Security Force. 7, support for Afghanistan's reconstruction program in post-2014 period, a beginning of which was made at the Tokyo conference. 8, ensure private sector investment in Afghanistan. In this connection, India hosted a meeting in Delhi on June 28, where the Afghan government was able to showcase its opportunities for international investors from different parts of the world. The Indian consortium, consisting of public and private sector has made a beginning and has been awarded 3 blocks after a tendering process at the Hajigarh iron ore deposits. India and China are 2 countries which have started work in exploiting Afghanistan's mines for the benefit of the Afghan government and people. 9. Asia is a region of energy resources starting from the Persian Gulf, going through the Caspian Sea and Central Asia to Siberia and Russia's Far East. The energy baskets needs to be exploited for the benefit of Afghanistan, the Central Asian republics, and South Asia. The Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline is one example. I'm mentioning a practical thing that has happened. And finally, I will conclude by saying that Afghanistan should become a peaceful and stable hub, linking Central and South Asia through a network of trade, transit, and pipelines which will benefit Afghanistan, its neighbors in Central Asia and South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Now we look more at the security side of things, and I think we could hardly have anybody more authoritative than NATO's Assistant Secretary General for Operations, Ambassador Evans, to address this topic. Ambassador Evans is, before serving as the Assistant Secretary General for Operations in NATO, has a very distinguished career in the UK diplomatic service. He was, among others, he was ambassador to Afghanistan, so he has a direct experience also on the ground of these issues. And he was also seconded to the UN Special Mission to Afghanistan and was engaged in shuttle diplomacy to promote a ceasefire between the Taliban and the Northern Alliance. He also reopened the British Embassy in Afghanistan in November 2001, 6 days after the collapse of the Taliban regime. He had a number of other high-level posts, mostly in Asia. He was High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, and he served in Pakistan, in Turkey, in Thailand, in Vietnam, among others. So, Ambassador, you have the floor. You have also heard questions on the role of other security organizations like SCO and CSTO, so it would be interesting also to see also your view on the actors following 2014. Please, Ambassador.
Secretary General, thank you very much. Secretary General, Ministers, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you today in this wonderful part of Slovenia, and I look forward to the discussions that we're about to have. Now, I'm mindful that we are talking about Central Asia and Afghanistan after 2014. That's the exam question we've all been set. I'm going to take a NATO perspective, and inevitably that is going to be focused on Afghanistan because that's where NATO is most engaged. We are fighting in Afghanistan the most significant military campaign NATO has ever fought, and we are paying the highest price we have ever paid in terms of blood and treasure. So we have a very major stake in Afghanistan. Let me make 6 points, and the first of those points is that after 2014, NATO will no longer be engaged in a major campaign in Afghanistan. We have a clear strategy set out at the Lisbon Summit in 2010 and expanded and endorsed at the Chicago Summit in 2012. By the 31st of December 2014, Afghanistan will be fully responsible for its own security. And it is right and proper that it should be. Afghanistan is a sovereign and independent nation. Of course it should have full responsibility for its own security. We are currently in a process we call transition. This is the process by which responsibility for security is transferred incrementally from NATO forces to Afghan forces. And central to this process of transition is the development of the Afghan national security forces themselves, so they can take full responsibility for security in Afghanistan under the command of and under the leadership of the Afghan government. Second point I want to make is that NATO is not going to abandon Afghanistan. Our military campaign will end on the 31st of December 2014, but we will retain a major train, advise and assist mission in Afghanistan beyond 2014. And we will also continue our broader relationship with Afghanistan, which is set out in the Enduring Partnership Agreement with the Government of Afghanistan, which NATO signed back in 2010, and which takes the long-term look at the relationship between NATO as an institution and Afghanistan as a nation. My third point is that there is an assumption, and that assumption is that NATO's current military campaign, the process of transition, the campaign that the Afghan National Security Forces will have the lead for after 2014, the longer-term relationship between NATO and Afghanistan will deliver NATO's objectives. They will deliver the objectives of NATO's partners in the International Security Assistance Force, which numbers a total of 50 nations. They will deliver the objectives of the government of Afghanistan, and they will deliver the objectives of the wider international community. And they can, I think, be crystallized into four key themes. Firstly, an Afghanistan which is never again a haven for terrorists or terrorism, a point which Ambassador Lambert made a little earlier. An Afghanistan which is broadly at peace, where there is no major insurgent threat to that country's stability. An Afghanistan which is democratic and where the government of Afghanistan's authority is exercised throughout the country, and an Afghanistan where there has been clear progress on governance, on the rule of law, and on licit economic development. That leads me to my fourth point, and that is that NATO in Afghanistan is not going it alone. And we won't be going it alone in Afghanistan after 2014. It's about partnership. There is a real partnership between NATO and the government of Afghanistan, epitomised by this whole process of transition with the transfer of security responsibilities from NATO forces to Afghan forces. There is very close cohesion between NATO's effort and that of the wider international community. We've already had a reference earlier on to the Bonn and Tokyo and Istanbul conferences. So what NATO is doing on the security track parallels what the international community is doing on the economic development track, what the government of Afghanistan itself is doing on the political track. And responsibility, for example, for sustaining the Afghan National Security Forces beyond 2014 financially will be carried not just by the government of Afghanistan and NATO and ISAF forces, but by the wider international community as well. And that brings me to my fifth point, which actually isn't a point at all, it's a question. And the question is, how are we doing? Just what is our assessment of the campaign and the state of transition? Transition is actually on track. 50% or more of the population of Afghanistan already live in districts where it's the Afghans who have the lead for security. 80% of counterinsurgency operations in Afghanistan are led by, run by Afghan forces or are carried out by Afghan forces in partnership with NATO forces. Only a tiny minority of military operations now are solo operations by NATO forces. By the middle of 2013, the Afghans will be in the lead for security throughout the country, with NATO forces very much in support. Central to this whole process is the growth of the Afghan National Security Forces. They will reach a level of something approaching 352,000 within the next few months and maintain that level throughout 2014-2015. But it's not totally straightforward. We still face a major insurgency. We still have to face problems such as the very highly publicised insider attacks against NATO forces. There are serious issues surrounding governance, corruption, rule of law. The direction of travel is the direction of travel we want to see, but we're not there yet. And I think a lot will hinge on how things pan out politically and on the security and on the economic fronts over the next couple of years. Which then leads me to my sixth and final point, which is what will Afghanistan look like after 2014? Firstly, it will be an independent, sovereign nation which is fully responsible for its own security. Secondly, I think that improvements in security, and those improvements in security will be continued, will allow improvements in governance, particularly subnational governance, governance at the provincial and district and local level. We will have a new government in Afghanistan because in 2014 there will be presidential elections. So we will have to see who emerges as the president of Afghanistan after an election that we hope and trust will be free, fair and peaceful. We may see progress on reconciliation, and to me this is the key element in the equation. Somewhere along the line there has got to be some form of negotiation, some form of reconciliation progress that brings in government of Afghanistan, the insurgency, call them the Taliban, call them whatever you like. That has to be an Afghan-owned, Afghan-led process. It's not a process that will be owned or led by NATO, but it is a process which, if it can make progress, will be the most important factor, I think, in Afghanistan's stabilisation in the future. We will see Afghanistan continue to enjoy very widespread international support. At the second Bonn conference at the end of last year, the concept of the transition decade was established. That is the 10 years during which Afghanistan, because of its fragility and because of the security threats it faces, will receive additional international assistance to help it progress and move to the point where it can be where development in Afghanistan can be a self-sustaining process. NATO will do its part of that wider international effort during the transition decade to support the government and people of Afghanistan. And NATO will do it in partnership with regional organisations. And picking up on a point which Ambassador Lambert made, I do think that there is a real future in seeing NATO fit its actions and activities in Afghanistan into a wider network of partnerships with other countries in Central Asia. These are partnerships which already exist, but which can be developed further. And I would see, as we move through Afghanistan's transformation decade, NATO form a mutually reinforcing network of relationships with the countries of the region, which are designed to ensure that it is a region which has a bright future, a future which is not dominated by violence and terrorism, but which offers real hope for the people of that region. Thank you very much, Secretary General.
The next couple of speakers will now address the topic of this panel from an Afghanistan perspective. So the first, with Waisi, is currently Director General for Economic Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan, and he served previously as Senior Regional Cooperation Advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Senior Advisor to the Minister of Finance, and used also to be Director of Formulation for the Afghanistan National Development Strategy, the 5-year strategic plan, all jobs that are very fitting for the sort of issues we are addressing today. On top of that, he is a member of the Asia-Pacific Community of Practice. He is a member fellow and coordinator of Afghan Young Leaders Initiative, and is also founder and chair of the Green Club, a leading environment society in Afghanistan. Mr. Wisi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. To address all those three questions, I would like to highlight some issues. On Central Asia, then I will focus on Afghanistan and the implications. Asia is a resource-rich region, and I will give you some figures. The GDP growth of Asia, Central Asia, is 6.9 today, compared to the rest of the Asian country, which is 6.8. There are three major corridors: the Siberian corridor, the Europe to China corridor, and the Southern corridor, which connects India to the Middle East. These all three corridors has big continental implications. The New Silk Road Initiative, or the former Silk Road, is also connects the Asia to Europe, which is part of these corridors. There are regional organizations engaged in Central Asia, which is a good, big benefit, brings big benefit to the people and prosperity of the region. I can name this ECO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Euro-Asian Economic Community, or EEC, OIC are also there. From global point of view, we have got IMF, World Bank, ADB, OECD, and WTO engaged in Central Asia. So far, 36 foreign trade agreements have been considered in this region as of October 2011, which out of these 36, 28 are concluded. This is showing a good sign of improvement in the region. Central Asia's total trade share, this is very much interesting, in 1995 was 26% with the European Union, and today it is 33%, which is the largest compared to the rest of the Asian countries. But with all these opportunities, I put four obstacles impedes the further development, which could be continued as a source of lessons learned for future cooperation and development. But still, infrastructure is a big obstacle. Infrastructure in the form of roads, electricity, and agriculture, railways. These are the prerequisites for the enhanced cooperation among regional countries. Trade liberalization, tariffs, cost of imports and export is also a big impediment to the regional cooperation in Central Asia. According to ADB's recent study, the poor investment climate, bureaucracy, and governance, including rule of law, corruption, political stability, and regulatory quality, they are also considered as big obstacles in this region. But what are the solutions? How can this could be further developed? One of the big solutions is regional cooperation, and this is what everybody has been acknowledged so far, because Central Asia has the highest number of landlocked countries in the region. They really need big economic tie and economic connection and integration. They need to trade outside of their borders, and they need to connect several routes for the sake of their population prosperity and economic development. studies show that regional cooperation really contributes to human development. And human development improvement in a nation contributes to human rights, contributes to respect to human rights, economic development, and finally to democracy. As I also mentioned, that the biggest solution for the regional cooperation or the existence of the regional economic organizations. So far, the region has got benefit of the presence of those organizations, and particularly in Afghanistan, the presence of the international community has got big impact in our emerging development and economy in the region. Continuation of those support, not only financially but technical assistance, is really important, not only for Afghanistan but in the region. And more coordination in terms of and activities are also important. For Afghanistan, Afghanistan has initiated a regional economic cooperation conference in 2004. That conference is moving further, and every country every year is hosting one of these conferences. But there are projects being discussed which are all having regional economic impact. But as I mentioned, the obstacles before, they are also challenging those projects and activities. Specific on Afghanistan, when we are talking about regional cooperation, so far, one of the missing ingredient of the regional cooperation for Afghanistan was talking on politics and talking on security. Because talking on economic cooperation is only one-way road. For that purpose, last year, the new idea of Heart of Asia emerged in the region, and so far that is moving very fast and very good. Afghanistan is not only dealing with their 6 neighbors, but now we are talking about 14 countries connecting the region, each other economically, socially, some shares of security and also politics. They all agreed to discuss issues in terms of promoting and development of confidence among themselves. So therefore, confidence building measures are one of the key areas of focus of the Heart of Asia countries. So far, they have identified 43 CBMs, and 7 has been now in discussion among all those 14 countries. When I'm talking about 14 countries, actually, there are supporting countries as well. The similar number of countries engaged in Heart of Asia, we have got from Japan to United States and European countries. They're also engaged in that process and to support these initiatives. Those 7 CBMs are mainly focusing on security, on governance, and on economic development to address all these regional challenges. So the belief is that building these confidence is really building the future of the cooperation among these countries. We had on 14th of June the first ministerial meeting of Heart of Asia, and they started to develop the implementation plan for those 7 CBMs. And in upcoming United Nations General Assembly, there will be another meeting of the ministerial meeting on Heart of Asia, which puts bigger tie on this connection. I would also like to highlight an Afghanistan-focused issue, which was the recent Tokyo conference. The Tokyo conference was basically considered as a last development conference and transition decade, transition period for Afghanistan. Afghanistan presented it as a strategy for self-reliance in that conference. But the difference of that conference, development conference, from the previous ones were the conditionality of the donors in terms of improvement in governance and performance of government through a mutual accountability framework. So now government and the international community, they are working together to develop the issues under the framework and monitor and measure the progress. So what I want to conclude is that Afghanistan really stands at the crossroad of two contrasting visions, which I presented to you. Number one, the geopolitical location and the economic significance, which connects East to West and South Asia to Europe. And the second, on the other hand, is rising conflict in Afghanistan, international terrorism and narcotics trafficking. So what is the will of the 30 million people living in Afghanistan? The stake is for them to choose. And also the 100 million people are living outside of Afghanistan in our neighboring countries. So I will leave this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you also for pointing to one of the challenges, in fact, we have seen in the various initiatives launched by the international community, the fact that the countries neighboring Afghanistan are very diverse. And while they all focus on bilateral cooperation with Afghanistan, for the international community to be able to try to develop a regional approach, a coherent regional approach, having at the table countries so diverse, like Central Asia and former Soviet countries, China, Iran, India, Pakistan, etc. It has proven at times very, very hard. So that's why also you have this group of 14 on CBMs with sort of other external partners that assist and incentivize and push for more coherent engagement. Now, let's move to the second presenter from Kabul, Mrs. Sarai. She spent a long time in exile, but she came back and started working on very important issues in my view. Issues of women and children. She's created an announcer of a radio program for women, a radio program which is broadcasted all over Afghanistan. But not only, she apart from running the program, she established women's listening circles in the villages of Afghanistan, where women would gather to listen to the program and then to discuss the topics that are raised at the program. So she's really raising awareness to issues and stimulating debate around these issues. She's been an advocate for women's rights, pushing for women's participation in the Peace Jirga and the Peace High Council. She's the founder and director of Organization for Research in Peace and Solidarity, and she's also executive board member of Afghan Women Network, the biggest women network in Afghanistan. She's very engaged in working against corruption and working on education, trying to promote girls' participation in higher education and participation in tertiary education for Afghan women. I think very important issues that are, I think, also high on the agenda of the international community as it works to assist Afghanistan in its own development. Ms. Sarai, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm really very pleased to be here amongst everybody, and I'm so glad everyone attended. I'm sure you're all interested to know what all of us are going to say about that part of the world. Thank you very much. What I'm going to be talking about is going to be mostly the role from the point of view of a woman in Afghanistan. And that is becoming extremely important because in Afghanistan there is this continuous struggle between the women of Afghanistan and the whole establishment, which is the government, which is the clergies, which is the culture, you name it. We are continuously in struggle because we would like to take our place in the society and really play our role as the Afghans for building Afghanistan. First, I wanted to say thank you to the world for really helping the Afghan women, standing by them. If it was not for all of you doing what you did, today an Afghan woman would not be sitting over here and representing Afghanistan. That's something for sure. Nor in Tokyo conference, giving the speech about the women of Afghanistan and what we want and being there as a speaker from Afghanistan, nor in Bonn, nor in any other one of the gatherings that the international world has. But what I really want to touch on is not so much as praising what the world is doing for Afghanistan. You have done absolutely amazing work. But I really wanted to point out about a few things that are not working very well. And maybe the intentions are extremely good, but it's not working for the women of Afghanistan. One of those things that I really want to mention, for example, is the question of for the reintegration in Afghanistan. The world decided, which is a very good thing from one point of view, to have, mostly NATO decided, to have a group of the soldiers in the area. They call them the Arbakis, and they are the people that they are in the place from the area, and they're supposed to be supposedly helping the people and protecting them against the Taliban. This thing is working in some parts of Afghanistan and is giving very positive result, but in some other parts of Afghanistan is not. It's really putting the life and the situation of the Afghan woman in a big, huge danger. On the other hand, as far as the rest of the work in the area, from the view of a woman and being very involved, actually, and I want to say this thing, especially in the Afghanistan civil society, we really are very much involved. The main obstacle in Afghanistan, whether it is in this area of working, economically with Central Asian countries, which to me is not only Central Asia, is really the SAARC plus Central Asia, which makes it in that regional. I mean, we really have to look at the world from the regional point of view and from the global point of view, because as the talks were going on yesterday, it made me realize that the world is really shrinking, the resources are shrinking. If we don't get a new idea and a new approach to how we are going to harness all of this, how we are going to split the as they call it, the goodies, and how do we go on in life, I don't think there is going to be really that much left for the people of the world to even share it or even talk about it. I don't think there's going to be a world left, to tell you the honest truth. So anyways, as far as that is concerned, in Afghanistan, or mainly about what is happening from the world, helping them, what is really actually stopping on the way is the corruption. Corruption in Afghanistan is to the point that nothing, I mean absolutely nothing can be done. None of the money that you guys send and it goes to Afghanistan is ever going to be used the right way. None of the developments that you really want to do is ever going to be done. None of the things that you really are hoping for the people and the women of Afghanistan have really, lots of it, have really become a reality. And you know the reason? Is because of corruption. Corruption is pandemic in Afghanistan. It is so bad that really it has stopped, it has crippled us completely. So that should be the number one priority of the world, working with Afghanistan in any form and shape, whether it's in economically getting all of the region together, whether it's in help, whether it's in anything. Building Afghanistan, we really have to tackle this corruption problem. Because if we don't do that, nothing is really going to get done. And this much I can tell you. And it's like, it is so absolutely bad. But then again, the corruption in Afghanistan, in Tokyo conference, there were talks about this framework of accountability. This framework of accountability is something that goes both ways. Because at the same time in Afghanistan, a lot of money came and it made a turnaround and then went back out. And what was left in this turnaround were just trickles of something that was left. It went right out. So this kind of a future for Afghanistan, for the help to come in and make a turn and then go back, whichever way it's going, is not going to help Afghanistan. And at the end of the day, what happens? We all are standing, as an Afghan, I am so ashamed to look at the world that is giving me continuously handouts, but at the same time, neither me nor they have any way to explain to me what happened to all of this money. The amount of money that went into Afghanistan, it's absolutely ridiculous how huge it was. What happened? What is the result? Who saw what? I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it, neither the people of Afghanistan. So, all of this said, I believe that we can go on finding more as far as the economy is concerned, getting the world together, putting their resources. But one thing I really want to say, please, let's not make this world again the world that it used to be. The part that used to create and then the part that used to eat it. It just won't work that way. If we are not going to be all-inclusive, if we are not going to take and share with the people of the world that have the resources for them to make their lives better as well as everybody else, we are going to have a huge problem in our hands. Because there is a lot of awareness, there is a lot of awakening that is happening in the world. So the world of 30 years ago is no longer, and is not going to be the same thing in another 20 years. And anytime, honestly, when I look at the ideas that they kind of get stuck with the old way, it scares me. I mean, I am on my way out, but there's a young generation coming up. What are they going to do? What are we going to say to them? What did we do with your world? We ruined it? And so sorry. I mean, you don't have any more water, you don't have any more nature, you don't have any more trees, and you don't have any more anything because we really did a bad thing. It just doesn't work that way. So we really, in every sense, in every point of view, Afghanistan, the women, the men, please listen to all of us. Listen to the complaints that maybe we have, to the critics that we have. Maybe some of those critics can be fixed, and maybe some other results will come out of it. But if people don't listen, then nothing is really going to happen. Thank you so very much. I know this was about Central Asia, but to me this is very important because I was told that this is not going to be only about one particular subject. We can talk about it in a broader way. So thanking Bled Forum, I'm glad I had the chance to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Serras. And this gives us the opportunity to start with an additional question. The next presentation,
Great.
A presentation from a representative of a country that is very strongly engaged in assisting Afghanistan. Mr. Yamada is the resident representative of the Afghanistan office of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. And he has a very hands-on, very operational career. He was Deputy Director General of the Secretariat of Japan Disaster Relief and Director of the Infrastructure Division Grant Aid Department of the GICA, but he was also Director General of the Operation Department of the Japan International Cooperation System, and mainly focusing on Afghanistan and Iraq. And he has also an academic background, as he served as a lecturer at the Tokyo University on Global Environment Economics. So we heard Mrs. Serras saying that is the international community really listening to the people and understanding what the people expect, and are we doing the right things? Can we improve the way we operate? Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. And also, it is my great pleasure for me to invite as a paneler in Bread Strategic Forum. Now my presentation now covers the following key question. Where do strategic potential of cooperation lie? Already paneler mentioned, as we all know, most of the international forces are scheduled to withdraw by the end of 2014. So procurement is expected to decrease after that. Experience of other conflict-affected contexts also suggests that withdrawal of international troops lead to reduction of civilian aid. The Afghan government does not have sufficient amount of revenue to cover the full amount its annual budget now. Therefore, it is concerned that the economic and financial status of Afghanistan will be negatively and seriously affected by the security transition. Improvement of economic and social infrastructure and revitalization of the economy will be the key to minimize the negative impact. And also, the demographic distribution of the Afghanistan population has a pyramid structure. Those under 15 years of age constitute almost half of the total population. Its meaning is the young generation is very important in Afghanistan. And also it is worth mentioning that according to the statistics, it is estimated that 400,000 people newly join the labor force every year. If we include potential returnees coming back from refuge outside of the country, the figure may become even larger. We need to expand employment opportunities to effectively absorb increasing labor resources. I would also like to draw your attention, already mentioned Ms. Selaj, to women, many of whom had been left distressed for years socially and economically. Improvement of women's lives and status, as well as accelerating their social participation, is a key to achieving social stability and robust economic structure. However, attempts to expand employment opportunity in Afghanistan seem to be facing a significant challenge due to the regional context. In recent years, neighboring countries including Iran, Pakistan, and Turkey recorded a large increase in export to Afghanistan. Afghanistan became the third largest importer of Pakistan and the ninth of Iran. The influx of low-cost labor and goods is a challenge to creating job opportunity in Afghanistan. In such regional circumstances, it is vital to Afghanistan not only to promote self-sufficient development, but also to formulate well-balanced economic ties with neighboring countries, which would then help regional stability. Not only national level analysis, we need analysis at the provincial level, as well as at the regional level in order to identify economic sectors in Afghanistan that have comparative advantage to those in neighboring countries. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in the regional context, Japan considers the north-south route important because it would contribute to the whole regional, including Afghanistan, and promote cooperation among the nations in the region. In order to enhance the transportation along the north-south route, Japan provides loans and grant aid for construction of railways and roads, and donates customs equipment to border authorities. The assistance is extended in coordination with CAREC, Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation. Now, the assistance of the Japanese government focuses on 3 areas for Afghanistan reconstruction. First, capacity building of the security sector, support for social and economic reintegration of former insurgent soldiers, and last, development assistance towards self-sufficient growth. Japan's assistance since 2001 to 2012 total about 3.3 billion US dollars. In its development assistance, Japan and JICA has been helping to fill the gaps in the many areas. JICA's development assistance has been based on the concept of human security. Japan has only provided civilian assistance. We believe that such characteristics of Japanese assistance lead to a specific perception of our assistance among the Afghan population, leading to their trust in our support. It is especially important for us donors that our assistance helps the Afghan people to enjoy the dividends of development or dividends of peace, so that the Afghan government gains the public confidence at the central and local level. Our contribution facilitates economic growth and expansion of employment opportunities, which led to social and economic stabilization of the country. Now, for its future activities beyond 2014, JICA plans to focus on 2 main areas. One is agriculture and rural development, and another is urban development and infrastructure for absorption of increasing labor resources effectively. Agriculture and rural development is a crucial sector in Afghanistan. This is because almost 80% of the population lives in the rural area, and 1/3 of the GDP relies on agriculture. In agriculture and rural development, we aim to enhance productivity of agriculture produce and to increase the level of self-sufficiency for food. Agriculture and rural development is a crucial sector in Afghanistan. I believe this area has a potential to increase the national income. How to cope with the vulnerability of the farmers and the agriculture sector is one of the key issues for stabilization of the country. In the rural development sector, I would like to draw your attention to a cross-border project that JICA implements on the Afghanistan-Tajikistan border. The project targets a dozen districts in Badakhshan provinces on both sides of the border, where we facilitate cross-border meeting of local actors of various levels, from provincial governors to local communities. And also, ladies and gentlemen, our urban development activities features the development of Kabul metropolitan area, the development of new Kabul city, which is an extension from existing Kabul city, is expected to inspire private investment and job creation. This has a big economic impact, assuming the GDP growth and that GDP distributed proportional to the population economic impact of Kabul metropolitan area development will contribute about 8 to 11% of national GDP. We believe our intensive and balanced activity in those two areas will also help increase visibility of our assistance in both Afghanistan and Japan. Finally, JICA also started a scholarship program for up to 500 Afghan government officials and academia to study in master's program in Japan for the next 5 years. It is to accelerate capacity building, mainly in our two focus areas. The beneficiaries of these programs are expected to acquire knowledge and skills in their respective area of work, and so that they can make major contribution to sustainable development of their home country upon their return. In cooperation with international community, Japan and JICA will constitute its sincere and serious effort to provide its civilian assistance for the Afghan population in accordance with priorities set by the Afghanistan government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yamada. And I have to thank you also for the support that Japan is giving to the OSCE. Japan has assisted us in setting up the Border Management Staff College we have in Dushanbe for training of Tajik and Afghan border guards and in some of these cross-border cooperation projects. So now it's your turn. There's about half an hour for comments and questions to the panelists. Please introduce yourselves and also, if possible, specify to whom you're addressing your questions. So first of all, first row here. Microphone here.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. May I take this opportunity of introducing myself first and then also thank the organizers. My name is Imam, H.T. Imam. I'm advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh. I have come here on the invitation of the Bled Strategic Forum and particularly the government of Slovenia and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The visit here and the participation during the last 2 days in the different panels have been very educative and enlightening for me and for my other colleague who is with me. The problems that are being discussed have very much similarity with the problems that we are dealing with in Bangladesh. Ambassador Stephen Evans was in Bangladesh and is aware of the issues that we are faced with. One thing that strikes me is that Afghanistan and Central Asia, this is the topic of discussion today. I wish you could broaden it and bring in South Asia with it, because Afghanistan is also a part of South Asia. Our ties with, Bangladesh and India's ties, the region's ties with Afghanistan are historical. This is based on our common shared ideals, religion, practices, etc. And we have had trade relations with Afghanistan for many years. And it was at one time when the Taliban were at the helms of affairs in Afghanistan, we also bled, because it was a common threat not only to Afghanistan, but it was a threat to world security, especially to India and Bangladesh. There were Taliban fighters who were operating freely along the borders. Now that security has been restored, the NATO has played a vital role, the Allied forces have played a vital role, and we, in a very small manner also, have had something to do with Afghanistan's development. The answer really lies in economic development. The focus should be on development of the economy, the societal development, and also decentralized development, not just centralizing focusing on Kabul, but also in the other areas, other districts. We have common experiences in this, and you'll be glad to know that there are organizations in Bangladesh who are working in Afghanistan, the NGOs, non-government organizations. There are government officials also who are helping, and we can play a very important role to all of us together. You might know that Afghanistan is a member of SARC, South Asia Regional Cooperation Association, since 2007. It was at the initiative of Bangladesh, and since then Afghanistan regularly is participating in the SARC development projects. And the connectivity issue, that is of utmost importance. If we can have from Central Asia through Afghanistan, via Pakistan to India, and then onwards to Bangladesh, and why not to Myanmar and to China, all of these, the railway connections, the road connections that are being planned and that are being developed, all of these really offer big opportunities of development cooperation between all of these countries together. And that will bring in stability, that will also weed out the so-called militants who are a threat to all of us. And what the other panelists, the lady mentioned about corruption and the empowerment of women, I think in that area also we might as well be of some assistance. We can, if we work all of us together, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and the Central Asian states, then in the region, and as well as Nepal and Bhutan, and why not Sri Lanka? All of these together can really be of great assistance to not only Afghanistan's development, that will develop us, our own economies as well. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this South Asian perspective. I had two questions there, a third row there on the left.
First, I would like to appreciate from all and everybody. My name is Nasser. I'm not a politician. I'm not a government employee. I'm just talking in a very simple way. Since I live in Afghanistan, I just came from Afghanistan, and I'll go back 1 month later. What I see here, everything is always just being said, as Ms. Mahbooba Saraj also mentioned. I'm not going to be pessimist. As an Afghan, I would like first appreciate, and I do not want to offend anyone here, those who supported my country. And then, on the other hand, I want to mention the things that I see every day. During Russian war, 9 years, I didn't lose any of my close family members. But I lost in the recent years, brother, cousin, and uncle. This is what I have achieved. If you want to see the security situation in my country is improved, I tell you not. In 2002 and 2001, I was working in Batkis in Balamarkap, very dangerous area. Now, I was not feeling afraid. I was working 4 years in Farah, next to Helmand. I didn't feel scared at all. I was walking every day with a German girl accompanying me, working with me together. I didn't feel scared. But now I cannot go to Shindan, which is 104 kilometers far from my house. On the other hand, we have, right now in my country, 480,000 troops, international and Afghans, but I don't see that much a strong Taliban or any insurgent to defend against them, to fight against them. Why it is like this, and what is the reason? Because a governor, a minister, a mayor are in the wrong position by wrong people. Afghanistan is too much centralized. I am a Turkmen. I am proud of being also an Afghan. I don't want to state that to isolate my country. No, that is not. But I want to ask those who are supporting my country, please teach my people how to give more competence for a governor who also lives in United States, but leading my province with 3 million people, and he is not authorized to move a metallic container which is blocking the road. Or he is not able to dismiss a single employee which he is not able to write, to use internet in the 21st century, also given a good model computer for him by international community in front of his desk. These are the points. And then, again I say, military cooperation, fully agreed. As I said, I am just a civilian. Please, do not leave us alone, but do not concentrate too much in military. 20% of the activities, the funding which is flown to my country, if it would be concentrated in civil activities, I would have a better situation. But if the system, if the system is going to be like this by international community and with my own government, you will not see changes in 2014. I'm saying that. 2014, you will not see any changes because I see what's going on in my country. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always good to hear also the feelings and the views of the people who are on the ground. Please.
Hello, I'm Alfred Horn, Regional Director for a German international NGO called HELP, British title but German NGO. And my headquarter for Afghanistan, Iran and India is in Herat, in a decentralized area, and we are working with JICA, in Bamyan as well. So I'm not going to make to ask questions. I'm going to make a comment. I say that clearly to start with. After listening to some of the contributions, and especially that of Mr. Evans, you and I probably have the feeling everything is fine. Actually, we are talking about a success story in Afghanistan, aren't we? Far from true. I mean, I lived there for 7.5 years already. I live there. I'm not visiting once in a while. I live and work there with guys like him and 250 other Afghans under my direct responsibility. Far from true. We are talking about a disaster. And that is because, in sharp contrast to the Japanese approach, thank you very much, sir. In sharp contrast to the Japanese approach, the Western approach, and especially the NATO approach, and the German approach, and I'm a German and I'm talking about my country's problems and mistakes, has been military driven. I know for sure that Germany has spent 25 billion euro over the last 10 years just for military support, for their own, for their troops, and only a fraction of that, 10 to 20%, something in between, have gone to, in addition, to civilian support. And that is the reason for the disaster, as I can tell you, as he has confirmed right now. And he is that one example of the young generation who will be able to take over responsibility in Afghanistan if we really give them support. So why do we not continue that? Your, sir, analysis of the past has been wrong, I'm sorry to say. One thing I have never heard, except for a parenthesis sentence here, is we're talking about regional cooperation. Where is Iran in that? You cannot leave out Iran and Pakistan, but especially Iran as the regional superpower, so to say, in a concept to solve the problem of Afghanistan. Number one, it's the stronghold of Shia, and in Afghanistan live about 25% of the people are Shia. Whole minorities like the Hazara in Bamyan are Shia. They look to Iran as their orientation. Whether you like Ahmadinejad or not, you cannot keep it out. So you have to include it. Number one. Now, against that, diametrically counterproductive to that, is that the Americans, not the NATO, but the Americans, want to keep and even extend their presence in the biggest military airbase or second biggest military airbase of the United States outside the United States in Shindand, south of my place, 100 kilometers south of my place, and 100 kilometers away only from Iran. Now, if you want to work with Iran, you cannot say, hey, if you don't look at us and don't do what we are telling you, we will... No. Why is that base in Shindand? So this is counterproductive. So please think about yesterday we talked about new paradigms. The paradigm of an empire of bases, as some American critic has said, is old. And if we, the Westerners, the NATO members, are following that, we will follow a bad, old, worn-out, and disastrous paradigm. Rather, and then I'll come back to you, lady, and to our Japanese friend. Rather, from now on, not waiting until 2015, we should start to support the only hope Afghanistan has, and that is to build up a broad, efficient, professional, honest, uncorrupt civil society. In the middle of the society, from women to professionals, to businessmen, to trade unions, to parliamentarians who are worth the word. People like him. That's why he's working in my organization. He's my reintegration officer. That's why I sent him here, and I'm grateful to the government of Slovenia who has supported that.
Okay,
this is the only chance. And please, let's start it today, not in 2 years or 2.5 years. Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple of questions on this side. Please, sir.
Hello. First of all, a very good morning to everyone here. Good afternoon, sorry. My name is Mehtab Singh, and I'm from India, currently stationed in Slovenia, as everyone might be knowing it. Many of my questions have actually been taken by a few of my fellow participants. We are talking about security, we're talking about Afghanistan, and I simply, actually, do not get it. How come we have forgotten Pakistan into that? It is one of the most important, or rather the only most important ally with Afghanistan and with the US, who has actually given its soil to the US-led forces, US-led NATO forces, in Pakistan, so that actually they can bomb Afghanistan. I would just like to, it is the only country which has lost the maximum, the blood and treasure. If we talk about the drone attacks into the northern western part of, or the Pashtun Valley in Pakistan, in the last 2 years, nearly 10,000 people have been died. Most of them civilians due to the drone attacks. I asked Mr. Evans from the NATO, how come the international community and the NATO justifies the killings of civilians through drone attacks? And you talk about leaving Afghanistan, and of course you would be having some of the bases in Afghanistan after 2014. That's wonderful, because as they need, you should be there. Thank you for that. But what about, would you be also leaving Pakistani soil, so that you cannot actually have an access to the Afghan security system, or to, because without Pakistani access, you cannot go to Kabul or that region. So what about, since you won't be having any, some of your workings in Afghanistan after 2014, what about your presence in Pakistan? And I would like to have your comment upon the drone attacks. Thank you.
Thank you. The lady there in the third row. Please.
I work with Regional Dialogue, a Slovenian NGO that works on the ground in Central Asia. We're based in Uzbekistan. I'm a little disappointed by very little concrete people-to-people strategic plans on cross-border cooperation. Apart from I do agree, the Japanese engagement in all these countries that are doing very concrete projects. I don't think there are any concrete plans in NATO either. So we'd like to hear a few more ideas on that. Concrete ideas, not diplomatic talk. We've heard enough of diplomatic talk. I won't be as rough as my colleague, but I do want to hear a little more from Mr. Vaisi. How concretely do you foresee the engagement of SCO? And also to Mr. Evans, how do you see cooperation that he mentioned, future cooperation between CSTO and NATO? That's new for me. Central Asia considers, more or less, CSTO as a paper tiger of diplomats meeting now and then. So what can that bring to Afghanistan? And how would the cooperation with NATO go in the future?
Thank you. Another couple of questions. I think I had the lady here. Please. Can you take a mic?
Thank you. I'm the ambassador of Egypt to Slovenia, and out of gender, solidarity, I would talk to Madam Siraj regarding the situation of women in Afghanistan. And you've been talking about achievements. You've been talking also about problems. And at the beginning of your speech, you said that you'll be saying a lot about women in there. I would actually be very curious, and I think the audience also, to tell me in this last 5 to 10 years, what was the main achievement, whether at the legal level, at the human level, at the social level, at the educational level for women. Because actually, I think that if this is achieved or partially achieved, already is much done there for your country. Thank you.
Well, thank you. One final question, and then we give the floor back to the panelists. Lady there, please.
Yeah. So my name is Barbara Beloselski. I run a company here in Slovenia, but I was employed at the headquarters of the European People's Party for the past 5 years in Brussels. And actually, it has been said a lot regarding the regional cooperation. And our colleague from India just mentioned that Pakistan in this story is also very important. And we know that nowadays Pakistan is a very unstable nuclear power, also in the region, and standing at the front line to become an Islamic fundamentalist country. So maybe a question would be from the point of view of NATO, and maybe for the representative of Afghanistan, how do they comment this regional stability from this point of view? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, of course, the topic of the panel was Afghanistan and Central Asia. So that's why I assume panelists and myself focused more on that region. It's not to belittle the role of Iran, Pakistan, the South Asia dimension, but simply for the sake of sticking to the topic of the panel. But I think we could also interpret these questions, these interventions, as arguing that it is difficult to do that. You can't look only at a part of the picture. You need to take everything into consideration because everything is interlinked. So with this sort of general consideration, I would give the floor to the panelists going the other way around and beginning with Mr. Yamada.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We are JICA as a part of one of the donors in Afghanistan. So maybe you know the fairy tale titled North Wind and Sun. So North Wind, my meaning is that troops, NATO. But we JICA want to become a sun. Sun shining is the people of Afghanistan for the dividends, distributed the dividends of peace and dividends of development. So this meaning is that it takes a long time maybe, but the Afghanistan people thinking no need to bring the weapon, however, this is our ultimate goal. But I don't intend to deny the troops, at least toward 2014. So this matter be mentioned from Ambassador NATO, what's the security the problem in the regional context. But say again, after the Tokyo conference, Japanese government with JICA reaffirmed to continue to the assistance to Afghanistan is closely related to another donors and another NGO in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Serraj.
Thank you very much for your question. When in Afghanistan in the year 2000 and before that, actually 1996 onwards, when the Taliban were there, the women of Afghanistan, I'm sure you've heard about it and read about it in places, they lost. It was not that they didn't have any rights before, because at the time of the Mujahideen and Taliban, that's the time when everything went completely crazy. But before that, the women of Afghanistan, they had right for education and everything. But during those times, the women schools were closed, women were not allowed on the streets. The Taliban used to actually beat them when they would see them on the street alone without a man. There was no school, no education, nothing. It was just a disaster. But the women of Afghanistan throughout that time, underground, in their houses, literally underground, they would have their schools and they would teach their daughters. And of course, there were some good men that were helping them at the time also. And this thing went on all over Afghanistan. And that shows the real resilience of the Afghan women about who they are and what they really want. After the 2001, the women of Afghanistan, they got together, and through the constitution of Afghanistan, they asked for a quota of 25% in the parliament of Afghanistan. And today, Afghanistan has actually more than 25% women in the parliament. At the same time, with the help of the civil society of Afghanistan and all of the women coming together, the level of education right now in Afghanistan in the year 2001, 2002 actually, there was no graduate that came out of the faculties of Afghanistan, women at all. Today, there's about 30% women being graduated that they come out of the universities. And this is absolutely phenomenal. The women, we have 3 ministers in the government of Afghanistan. In the High Peace Council, there are 9 members, which is not the 25%, and we still are fighting to get more. But these are all the achievements of Afghanistan's women that they have achieved during all of these 11, 12 years. And that's why it has become so important for them not to lose that. Right now, what we really want to do, we really want to get involved on this regional talks and conferences and working together with cooperation with our neighbors, with Pakistan, with Iran, with all of the Central Asian countries, with all of the SAARC countries. The women of Afghanistan are the ones that they really want to be ahead and they really want to work and bring a regional cooperation. Because I'm sure whatever goes on in any one of these countries, and Pakistan with the life of all of these people, losing their lives, the ones that are again are hurting and the ones that are again are the ones that are losing is the women. So the women all over the place are the ones that they are the most vulnerable, and they are the ones that they lose the most, and they are the ones that so helping them and for them to know their place and for them to know that they can get together and actually become a force, that's what the women of Afghanistan are doing. So as far as that is concerned, we are on the right track, and especially the Afghan Women Network that I happen to be a member of it, we really are working very hard. Right now we are still working, to get our participation in the government, raise it, to really bring it to 25%. We have asked the government to at least all of the deputy ministers of every one of the ministries, one of them should be a woman. And we are we are working right now on the Supreme Court, and we have nominated a few ladies actually to join the Supreme Court, and it's going to be passing pretty soon. So that is why all of these achievements are so important for us to keep it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Waisi.
Thank you very much. Given what we discussed, we need to really consider that Afghanistan is located in this part of Asia, but the whole Central Asia, the diversity is very much different, different than the rest of the world. India cannot cross to Europe, cannot go to Europe until crossing Pakistan or Iran. When we are talking about Afghanistan or regional cooperation or Central Asia, we cannot ignore both Iran and Pakistan. I just came I was attended last week in a trilateral between India, Afghanistan and Pakistan on Chabahar seaport. The importance of Chabahar is really big issue of regional cooperation. India is trying to invest on that port, and we cannot really get good benefits of our mineral resources if we don't have those corridors open. Again, with Pakistan, the APTA, Afghanistan-Pakistan trade agreement is a very good example, a very modern agreement between both countries. Again, affected by the several geopolitical issues which impedes the process and the improvement. With Tajikistan, we have a similar sort of situation. The Heart of Asia initiative, which I'm talking about, the 7 CBMs, they're really putting together a set of coherence among the regional partners. In Heart of Asia, when I'm talking about 14 countries, there is Iran and Pakistan, and there is Azerbaijan and other Central Asian countries. On the Heart of Asia initiative, we have regional organizations as well, including Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We just recently had a meeting of security in Beijing about concerns of conflict and insurgency in Afghanistan and role of Shanghai Cooperation Organization in this context. Our projects, for example, we have got 2 mega projects connecting connecting Central Asia to South Asia: the TAPI, the gas pipeline, and also CASA 1000, Central Asia, South Asia, 1,000 megawatt electricity, which brings electricity from Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan to Pakistan. So these are existing, while we have got several trilateral agreements so far moving. The strategic partnership with countries are also really important, which is emerging. Talking about civil society, I'm one of the coordinators of Young Leaders Initiative, and we are now trying to develop a network of youth societies in Afghanistan, which is the first ever in my land. And also, we are saying, let's not focus only on Afghanistan, let's bring together the youth leaders from neighboring countries and discuss about it and talk regional issues and regional obstacles. And I think youth can address these issues more clearly rather governments. So this has to be really supported in this region. So these are the issues that I wanted to discuss and talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Evans.
Good, thank you. I mean, one of the themes that I think has come out of the very interesting discussion that followed the panel presentations is a sense that force and the use of force is not an answer to Afghanistan's problems, and that has to be right. The use of force by NATO, the use of force by the government of Afghanistan, the use of force by NATO and the government of Afghanistan jointly will not solve Afghanistan's problems. What the use of force can do is to provide a counter to a threat from insurgents, a threat from terrorists, threats which threaten ordinary people. And it can, if you like, hold a security ring. It can buy time, it can buy space for other themes to move forward. And we've touched on those themes, and they're all very important. The political theme, building governance in Afghanistan at the central and local level that really works, where a government is accountable to the people. Dealing with corruption, which is indeed a cancer which affects the whole of society. Economic development, licit economic development, not economic development generated by the products of and proceeds of narcotics, but licit economic development that's pro-poor in nature. So it's the poor and vulnerable in society who benefit most from economic development. These are all the sort of themes that we want to see move forward. And they are themes which have a true cross-border regional dimension. So all we can do is to use force to try and buy time and space. Up until now, most of that force, if you like, has been exerted by NATO. That's ceasing to be the case. We are handing over responsibility, as I explained, to the government of Afghanistan. On the 1st of January 2015, we won't be there, except in a train advise and assist role. On the streets of Herat, you will be going about your business protected by the Afghan National Security Forces and the Afghan National Security Forces alone. But what we hope is that the transition of security will be allied to progress on the political and developmental fronts. And crucially, as I mentioned earlier, to the beginning of a reconciliation process between government and insurgency. And we need all these themes to come together. It's difficult. It's extremely difficult. It's been very challenging, and thousands, literally, of NATO soldiers have fought and died in Afghanistan in the hope that they can make a difference. I still believe they can. I still believe that the sacrifices are not in vain. I don't think that Afghanistan is a disaster. But I think Afghanistan is a very vulnerable country, and I think it will need the international community's effort, and crucially, the further efforts of the Afghan people to build a society that will work and to build a country that will be stable rather than unstable. It can be done, but it's going to be tough. Thank you. NATO does not carry out drone strikes in Waziristan or on the soil of Pakistan. If any drone strikes are carried out, they're carried out by a nation acting in a national capacity. You must address questions on that to the ambassador of that country. Thank you.
Please, Ambassador Lambert.
Being the last to speak, there is an advantage that most questions have been answered. My fellow panelist, Mrs. Raj, had mentioned, is the international community listening? I would say yes. We changed some of our plans of assistance to Afghanistan when 100 small community projects, each up to $1 million, are today being selected, administered by local communities in Afghanistan. I would like to add my voice to that of a moderator to another question, that Iran is important for any settlement. And finally, I would like to refer to what the Bangladesh envoy of the Prime Minister had just mentioned about involving the South Asian community. I think a message that could go from here is that from Dushanbe to Dhaka, there is need for economic connectivity of the region. And I would conclude by saying that both the areas, Central Asia and Afghanistan, as we look at post-2014, the most important thing that we have to do is to dismantle the infrastructure of terrorism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've come to the conclusion of a very interesting panel and very interesting discussion. I would like to thank all of you, the panelists, and but also members of the public, for your contribution. It is very difficult to draw conclusions from this. It's very much an ongoing work for all of us. My advice is that we should abstain from looking back and recriminating, and we've done that right, we've done that wrong. We should really look forward, where we go from here, what the priorities should be. And I think a number of very good points are being made, focusing on the development of the society, stronger civil society, the role of the youth, and working with the young generations seems to me to be a very important message, a very strong message has come out of this discussion. But working on the political issues too, reconciliation with the insurgents and the government is essential. You need to have an environment within which you must be able to work. Less centralization has been mentioned, giving more, empowering more the people. Certainly that is more important, but there is to be the support. That's the support, strengthening the economy, the rural society, etc. Working at the same time on infrastructures. Working on infrastructures often is frustrating because you make huge investments and you don't see immediately the benefit for the specific person on the ground. But then you create a premise for larger economic development that will affect everybody the same way positively. Fighting corruption and working against some of them, and of course drugs trafficking, etc., are important issues that are related to everything else. The external side of things is equally important, it seems to me. I think some raise the challenges of the cooperation in a framework within which the dialogue may be complicated, even in the Central Asia segment. The Central Asian countries bordering on Afghanistan don't always talk to each other the way they should. And some Central Asian countries, more than others, are very difficult when it comes to cooperation with international actors. I can see it in terms of direct experience of the OSCE with some of the countries in Central Asia where really developing cooperation activities is difficult, especially if they're related to Afghanistan, because they want full ownership and they want to have their own strategies in place, don't want to have interferences from outside. So it is challenging. But I think we have a very complex system where there is room for regional organizations to play a role, regional and larger organizations to play a role, each of them. Important is synergies, is staying coordinated. We don't need active common strategies, but we need to know what we're doing so that we can realign our activities. And probably with the countries of the region, all neighboring countries, considering also their differences, the best thing is to try to develop, as Mr. Wesley was saying, strategic partnerships between Afghanistan and each of them, and try to make it coherent without forcing them all around the table too much. To try to develop a strategy that they may be unhappy or uncomfortable with. So that element will have to remain in terms of a dialogue, but then with each of the countries, I think the cooperation should be developed and supported by external players. These are some of the considerations I would venture myself as a result of a much broader discussion, and I accept that these are only some of the points, and I would like once again to thank you all very much.